Okay, so the general idea is that when we're relying on these Orthodox apologists to kind of help strengthen our faith, because they will give us good reasons to believe the Orthodox hypothesis. They are supposed to give good support or good reasons to be Orthodox, to accept the Orthodox Church as their true church. Now, if these teachers or apologists, if they fail to show competence in handling the historical and theological sources, which they themselves agree is essential to the theological and ecclesial identity of the Orthodox Church, then that undermines the credibility of these the arguments that they put forward. Or if the arguments are faulty, that undermines the credibility of the apologists. And but then if we see specific arguments put forward that are less than convincing, they don't convince, we're supposed to think that the evidence for Orthodoxy is this overwhelming, triumphalistic thing, and anybody that doesn't agree with us is an idiot or a moron. But then we see that it's not necessarily the case. Many of the arguments are weak, or they have holes in them, or they rely on lying about the other traditions, or misrepresenting the other traditions, or they're based on ignorance of other traditions. So we say X is true about other traditions, and that's either we know that X is a false claim, or we're just so ignorant of the other tradition that we believe X is the case about that tradition. And so we say something like, well, if X is true about tradition Y, therefore tradition Y is false, and the Orthodox tradition is true, therefore the Orthodox Church is the true church. But then, that kind of argument is undermined by the fact that those claims are false. So the conclusion doesn't follow if the evidence in support of it is faulty. So we have to go ahead and look at all of the arguments and see which one of them is convincing. What's the best argument for Orthodoxy? And if all the best arguments for Orthodoxy seem to have substantial problems, they're undermined by other evidence, or they misuse the evidence or something, then we have the thing is, if these Orthodox apologists are putting forward sloppy, weak arguments, then that are easy to that are based on misrepresentations or ignorance, and or their arguments that they put forward can be undermined by actually examining the historical evidence, and we can see that these arguments are weak, that it's not as strong as we thought it was, right? Sure, there's probably there is evidence, but it's not as strong as we were led to believe. In fact, there's a lot of evidence for the Catholic hypothesis and against the Orthodox hypothesis, let's say. Then we are justified in saying the strength of our conviction that the Orthodox faith is the Orthodox Church is the one true church, the Orthodox hypothesis, is therefore undermined. And undermined to some degree. And we want to find ways of supporting it we want to find ways of supporting the Orthodox hypothesis that are legitimate and that are not undermined by fallacies or misuse of historical sources and so on. So sometimes that means we have to concede things to Orthodox critics. Sometimes it means abandoning mythology about other traditions and our own tradition. For instance, this is a big example. So when Maimonides says that the Orthodox Church is the one true church because the Orthodox Church doesn't believe in original sin, all the other churches do believe in original sin, then that's an argument. The Orthodox Church is the one true church because, and here are the reasons. So as long as those reasons are true, then the conclusion that the Orthodox Church is the true church follows from that. But then when one examines it, one sees not only does the Orthodox Church does teach original sin, but that the caricature of original sin that Maimonides had put forward isn't even accurate of those other traditions, except for it's accurate for maybe like a very small minority, right? And so we find that the Maimonides misrepresents the truth of the other traditions by equivocation and by applying a kind of minority view to the entire Western tradition. That's slander and detraction. And then claiming an exclusive, unique, triumphant evidence for the Orthodox hypothesis on that basis. Well, since he misrepresented the other traditions and history and theology and sources, then we don't trust him. And furthermore, because he said the Orthodox Church doesn't believe in original sin, and it does, then we see that he's willing to bend to the truth, or even inadvertently causes theological error by the rejection of Orthodox doctrine of original sin in order to support his own claim. So he undercuts his own tradition, because he has to reject his tradition to defend his tradition. And and then you can find, so the reason is like, Orthodox Church is the true church because the Orthodox Church doesn't teach original sin. But then you find all these church fathers do believe in original sin. Therefore, if his argument was correct to begin with, then if he's presenting this argument, it's a valid argument, right? But his premises are false. So the conclusion doesn't follow, because the theological sources of the Orthodox Church do teach original sin. So if his argument was valid, then we couldn't know that the Orthodox Church was the true church, because the premises don't follow. The conclusion doesn't follow for those premises, because the premises are wrong. Because essentially there's another argument, like any church that teaches original sin can't be the true church. Then Maimonides loses. So Maimonides' argument loses. Maimonides' argument we can verify. It's a testable claim because we can verify, do the church fathers teach original sin? And if they do, then Maimonides' argument loses. And Maimonides loses because we see he loses all credibility. And any triumphalistic claims that he was making now fall on deaf ears. So what we need to do is be honest with the sources, be honest with the evidence, make concessions if we need to make concessions, because that will strengthen our case. If we can make concessions, it strengthens our case, because then we're not caught misrepresenting the truth. We're caught seeming to be have a lot lacking credibility in our ability to handle sources. If we can say, yes, this doesn't seem like it supports our hypothesis, but we're going to be honest about it and say this is the evidence, warts and all, and we're handling the evidence with credibility, and then we present the best argument we can, not with like misinformation, lies and rumors and slandering other traditions, but with the most honesty and integrity that we can. And then whatever argument there is, we trust God that whatever evidence there is points to his church. And if that's the case, then we don't feel the need to like misrepresent, or like everything hangs on our finding some sort of triumphalistic argument, whether or not it's actually accurate to the truth, or fits with the evidence, the actual evidence in the world. But When we fail to do that, then we lose all credibility, and our arguments are susceptible to failure. And the failure of those arguments will inevitably cause us to the faith in the Orthodox hypothesis to be undermined.